are here today with Dannii Mathers. Dannii is a senior consultant and coach at SBR Consulting, a UK revenue firm, and a co-host of the Growth Workshop podcast. So excited to have another podcaster on our episode today. She started her career inside sales and marketing, moved into Transform Performance International, and spent the last decade plus working with revenue leaders across consulting, financial services, technology, digital, and one of the small number of UK coaches that we've had the opportunity to work with. We are really excited to have you on the podcast. We have a lot to talk about. There's been a lot of things that we've been swirling around that I think you have a ton of expertise on. So welcome to the Revenue Insiders.
So excited to join two women today. So thank you for inviting me along.
I think this is going to be really fun. We don't have the opportunity to have a lot of women guests on our podcast, which is, it's always exciting. I think we get like a very special kind of energy when it's three women kind of chatting about all of these topics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Putting the world to rights.
Dannii, I gave a brief overview of you, but there's so much more. I'd love to hear a little bit about your career journey. I mean, selfishly for myself, but I think everyone else would too. Maybe to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit how you ended up in the coaching world?
Yeah, so my career started off in sales a couple of decades ago, which always ages you really nicely, doesn't it? When you say it, a couple of decades. Definitely have the war wounds to go with it when you've been in sales, haven't you? I think that builds a different type of armor on you. But yeah, I started off in individual contributor roles and then moved into sales leadership. And I would say the part that I absolutely adored about sales leadership wasn't the KPIs, believe it or not, but it was coaching and developing sales reps. So actually seeing the difference when you really put time into people and genuinely take time to develop them. And I guess that's where I noticed the biggest growth trajectory in the teams that I had. It was from the coaching. Whereas I guess other people might say, oh, you need to have the processes and you need to start whipping people KPIs. Whereas I found you take a step back and actually understand what people need to do to help them be better, the kind of the how, as opposed to the telling them what to do. Yeah, that's where I noticed all the main type of behavior change. So that then led me into wanting to get into executive coaching. So I went off and did a degree in coaching just to really laser focus in on that skill. Because I think it's like everything. We all kind of think we know what we need to do, but I wanted to have the methodology, the framework, so that I could go to work and actually understand that I've got the right tools to not just be successful myself, but to have the guardrails to make other people be successful. So then from doing sales leadership and coaching, I then moved into enablement, because we all know enablers are the most fantastic coaches. And then enablement, I then went into more kind of AI and go-to-market consultancy. And I do believe, I guess if I look through my kind of career trajectory, it's, although it varies different roles, they all have that kind of common thread of kind of coaching and enablement. And I think especially with AI, that really lends itself well with the world that we're going into, because to be good at AI, most people need to be enabled. And enablers have spent their whole careers and professions giving people the skills that they don't currently have. So yeah, I think enablement serves a really good position to kind of really flex on the AI level.
Absolutely. You hit on one thing I love that we kind of don't talk about enough, is that there's usually a will. People want to be good at what they're doing inherently, but you hit on the fact that oftentimes they just don't know how. And we continue to tell them what to do, but we forget to tell them how to do it. And I just love that you touched on that, because I think it's so important and such a missing piece of sales leadership today, because we're so in the numbers and we're looking at the board metrics and the KPIs, and everyone's running fast. No one has enough time. And so I love that you touched on the how.
Yeah. And I think that's what we see with so many of our clients. Like everybody you all know you've got this number to hit. And I see go-to-market teams, commercial leaders get really frustrated when their teams aren't doing it. And it's like, well, they're not going to do it if you don't really explain how they can get on that journey and what great looks like, not just on an organizational level, but also on an individual level. And it's often that lack of alignment.
It's the hard work too when you're a leader. Like you have to spend the energy and having high emotional intelligence to really lean into people and understand what they're going through to help coach them in the way that they need it. That's it's hard work. It's much easier to look, I mean, not easy, but easier to look at a dashboard and say, like, you're this far from your number. You need to make X many more calls. Like, here's how the math works out to get to your pipeline number. But coaching is hard. And I think it's why it's important to have people across the board that support leaders in coaching. It's not something a lot of people can really do on their own.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's nothing that you're taught either. So you see that, and again, this has been such a kind of cliche saying, but you get your individual contributors who are awesome at their jobs, they get promoted, and they're left to drown. It is like literally sink or swim, and no one's ever given the tools that this is how you develop humans. This is how you make people better. And yeah, I guess when you have to find out yourself, quite often the damage control is attrition. Typically, I think when you get leaders that are, I would say, innately very good at coaching, going back to what you just mentioned, that high level of emotional intelligence, they tend to have higher levels of emotional intelligence. And when you look at some of the stats that show the high performing teams around the world are normally led by leaders who have high levels of EQ. So it always frustrates me when people say it's not important. Well, look at the high performing teams around the world. They're led by, if you look at all the statistics, they're led by leaders who have high levels of EQ. Why would you not want that? Why would you not want to develop that skill some more? Because you can develop it. You're not born with it. Yes, some people are naturally more gifted in that area. If you're naturally more empathetic or more resilient, but yes, you can build those skills. It's more of a case of going back to what you said, Kelly, the will. Do you want to do it? Or
we had a guest a while back, Rahila, and she talked about the fact that you can actually build the skill of EQ. And I think Tiffany and I were both really curious about that conversation because I do think there's a lot of belief out there that you either have EQ or you don't. And it's something that you can see in a child very early on. And so I love that you are thinking of this. I actually ran it was called Blue EQ with a sales leadership team once, so they could actually test their EQ and look at their different levels across it. And even that awareness of where their strengths are in EQ and where they have areas of opportunity was such an eye-opener. And those who wanted to really invest and were intentional about it, I saw massive changes. Have you seen big changes in EQ with people you've worked with?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting going back to, you were saying the program that you worked with that's shown people their levels of EQ. And I remember delivering an emotional intelligence program to a global organization. And we were using data based off an EQ assessment. But one of the biggest problems was the majority of the data came from themselves. So it was a self-assessment of their emotional intelligence, which for me, it baffles me, because if you're looking at, and they're like, I'm really high on EQ. I'm like, there's the problem. And the issue being is, if you don't have high levels of EQ, how are you going to score yourself? Because you don't have the level of self-awareness. We've been in a room plenty of time with leaders who have such low self-awareness and cannot read a room, have no idea of the emotions of people around them or what's being played out in a room. And it's like, there's simple things. If you're leading a team, you have to have that level of awareness of yourself and awareness of others. So yeah, I think that some of the self-assessments out there, I'm not completely convinced that they give a good view of someone's EQ.
So what do you recommend? I'm curious. I think of 360 reviews. I know that they've been tremendously helpful in my career, and I've used them as a coaching tool with people on previous teams. What do you recommend if someone's sitting here and says, this is something I do think is important, and I want to know kind of where my strengths are and where my opportunities are?
Yeah. So I think with the world that we live in today, I think that there are so many more options that are available and open to help people get that 360 view. And I would say, so ordinarily 360 is incredible, like a really great starting point. However, again, that can be, the validity of that can be at varying different levels depending on the psychological safety within the culture. So there's so many variables that can either influence or kind of deter how good that feedback is. So if you've got a really great culture, 360 feedback, brilliant. If you don't have a great culture, I just don't think it's a good place to start, because again, people will probably be too scared to actually tell you what the real truth is. So I think if you're in that environment, a next best action, not even a next best action, I would say a prerequisite to all of these like methodologies, if you like, is using AI to gather a lot of intelligence for you. And something that I worked on with a client not so long ago, Tiffany and I were just speaking about this previously. So I helped create an agent for a particular leader who wanted to improve their EQ, because they realized that, okay, I'm not quite getting the response that I need from my team. We've got a cultural problem. Like, where do I start? And in their session, they're like, I need to start on my EQ. So what we were able to do is aggregate a load of their transcripts from their one-to-ones, from their team meetings, from any kind of interaction that they had, whether it's client facing or internal meetings. And the agent was programmed to look at various different factors. So look at things like, are you over talking somebody? Are you giving somebody a chance to speak? Are you validating what somebody's saying? Are you asking questions of curiosity about maybe a problem that they had? So there was a lot that went into the programming behind this agent to kind of depict these various different signals. And then it would give them a report at the end of the week to say, okay, these are the gaps, these are the, because it's completely objective. It's not like, oh, this person said this about you, or so you're using this objective source, which I think is a really great place to start, because it's difficult to ignore or to argue against the data, because these are live transcripts. This is what it's, this is what it's kind of pulled out, but using it in a very different way. So using it to have a look at your kind of, and again, it's not looking at all EQ, because it can't do that, but it will certainly give you a fraction of information that's going to help your learning journey to improve whichever kind of blind spots that you might have. So I think that's a really good place to start. So 360, using like AI to kind of reflect some of the things that it's hearing. And yeah, I think you can kind of do some really great work, and with coaches as well. The human part is absolutely critical. So don't leave everything to AI. Don't let robots take over your life. But yeah, I think having that great balance of data, of a human coach to help kind of really elicit some of those blind spots, and then the data from your team that you're working with.
I think that is such a fascinating use case. We have had so many conversations around how AI is maybe taking empathy away from people or the sales process, and the need to like insert the human element into it. But to flip that around and say you can use AI to build your empathy or to recognize your blind spots is such a great way to think about it, because using it to parse large amounts of data is exactly the way that we should be harnessing the power of AI. I think that that's a very novel and fantastic way to try to even reflect on where you're at from an empathy perspective. I also think it's key, though, what you mentioned, it has to be objective data. So you can't just build an agent and then type your thoughts into it. I had this experience with so-and-so and they didn't listen to me, because the AI is going to side with you. It's going to create that confirmation bias. So all the transcripts and objective data you can get for sure makes that a really usable use case.
I think a lot of it is how you build it, right? We spoke about before how AI can be too nice. So I think when you're building these agents for whatever purpose, you can change the scoring. So if you want it to be really critical, then you ask it to be really critical. So I think depending on what feedback you're willing to receive, will be dependent on how you build out these tools to serve a greater purpose. But I think when you looking at AI as one source of truth to multiple data points that you would need, I think if you look at people that are typically low on the EQ level, it's a damn sight better than what they would do, what their starting point would be, because are they going to listen to anyone else around them? The likelihood is probably not. Whereas I think when they're getting these regular feeds, again, going back to that point of it's quite difficult to dispute, even if you move them 1% to, okay, I'm going to give this person a chance to talk, or I'll change my tone so I'm being more empathetic. That small change, even if it feels forced for them, it's going to have an impact on the person that they're speaking to. So if it feels unnatural, if it doesn't feel like it's authentic to them, and I'm not saying be disingenuous, but anything that you do to begin with feels uncomfortable. So they'll have to push through that point of, okay, I'm going to have to lean into this call now and be slightly different to how I normally come across. It's going to feel uncomfortable. That's great, because They're learning a new skill, that they are augmenting something that they typically wouldn't do. So yeah, I would definitely celebrate that awkwardness, and know that it's a journey, and the only people that are going to benefit, obviously themselves, but are their team. And we've got the data that proves that.
One thing that I've seen really effective, and I'm curious if you ever do this, is I actually recommend that, especially frontline leaders, less with executives, but also that they tell their teams that they're working with a coach, and they tell their teams that where their areas of focus are, so that when they make these changes, it doesn't feel inauthentic to everyone in the room. Because I've also seen someone who's working with a coach and they come in and they've learned all these things and they're trying to implement them all at once. And the team has like whiplash because like, who are you? And this is not how you usually show up. And this feels inauthentic to you. And I'm worried like something feels off. So I actually sometimes recommend like have the honest conversation with your team. These are a couple of things I'm working on. So I'm going to be more focused on it. You're going to see me ask different questions, and just know that that's part of my own growth and professional journey.
I guess such a fantastic example, isn't it? Like, talk about leading by example. If your team see you going on a development journey and you're trying different things, how can they not want to adopt the same behaviors? So the next time you go and say, okay, team, we've got to pivot, we've got to do this thing differently now, this is the kind of expectations. It really does open up that willingness to want to change behaviors, doesn't it? I think it's such a great example.
It's such a great topic, especially around like leadership coaching, because, we're in a different selling world than go-to-market world than we were in 2018. And we've talked about that a few times on like different episodes. Like money's not like falling from the sky anymore in like the B2B SaaS space. And it's really easy to be successful as a leader and get promoted as an individual contributor when like the dollars are just coming in. Like people will leave when they're not making any more money, and that's not a big signal to you. It's just, it was an easier environment to kind of grow your career in. And now, there's the whole AI side that sales leaders and, ICs, but sales leaders need to worry about. But in order to like develop these individuals when money's not falling from the sky, you have to be a good coach. And so I think more and more I've seen people are realizing that this is a key skill that needs to be built and not just a nice to have on the resume when they're looking at frontline leaders.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Tiffany. The one thing that I keep saying to like multiple people, whether this is colleagues, whether this is clients that we're working with, the good enough isn't good enough now. I think you're absolutely right. Like, leaders would do really well by having a strong team, and there'll be a terrible leader and their team were really unhappy. They've been in position for 10 years and that's just kind of the way it is. I think where we're moving into now, that, this evolution of like AI native or AI first, you will not stand a chance, because the one thing that's really strong right now is human skills. Because guess who can do your job better than you? AI. If you want a dashboard, if you want your forecast accuracy, AI is going to do that for you. The one thing it can't replicate is the way you build connection, the way that you encourage your team, the way you build relationships. Like, what a skill to be honing in on now in the world of AI. And I just don't think people can ignore that. And I almost feel like this is almost like a bit of a comeuppance, isn't it, for all of those leaders out there who have just ruined people's lives in the SaaS world for so long. Yeah, I just don't think there's a place for that now.
I was just naming off people in my head.
Yeah.
I'm in it's called the Ops Brain Trust. And it's a bunch of like, at this point, executives in the RevOps space that I've worked with over my career. And there was a text yesterday that was like, hey, so-and-so, do you remember when we spent like 18 months building this very accurate forecasting tool and dashboard that like really changed how we looked at data? I just had an analyst build it with Claude in 2 weeks, and it's the same, if not better. Like, the world is so different now. With the invention of AI for every role, for leaders, RevOps is highly impacted by like what you need to build skills in and be good at doing. I'm curious, one of the things that I'm sure you see a lot of is the impact of AI outside of just coaching on the sales process and how that's weaving in. What's your take on it? Where does it fit in best? What's working? What's not working? I'd love to like see what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic for so many reasons. One, because it's on every single organization's agenda. There has never been a time, I don't think, in history where there hasn't been one single item on every single company's agenda, which is great for opportunity. And I think what we're starting to see is specifically in go-to-market teams, roles are changing, but they are changing. And again, we haven't seen this before. And where I think people need to just start paying attention is you look at organizations like Gong, like who doesn't know who Gong is? They've now changed CRO to Chief Revenue Architect. When you see changes like that happening at the top, like Chief Revenue Architect, and that means like you've got to look at the tools and the systems thinking that has to go into place now. So that will just start ricocheting through the go-to-market org. And I think that level of skill is not going to be a nice to have. It's a necessity. And what we're seeing a lot of is this kind of scrambling mentality of everyone's telling me use AI first. But going back to that enablement conundrum, nobody's been enabled to use it. You've got, and what I'm hearing in organizations, and nothing against head of IT, by the way, if anyone's listening from IT, you've got the head of IT delivering AI training to a sales team. And, they're speaking two different languages and you wonder why it's not being adopted. So I think that, and going back to why I think enablement serves such a strong, valid role now in helping enable teams. We already enable them on skills, methodologies, best practices, systems, processes. I think it would make sense for it to start there as opposed to a function outside of GTM trying to help operationalize what people are doing. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing is everyone's told that they need to do it, but nobody really knows. People know how, but there's no standardization. So all the hows, you've got like multiple hows happening in organizations, and it's just causing a little bit of chaos and silos. You see people doing things really well, and it's almost like, well, what they're doing really well with AI is not being shared with anybody because there isn't the mechanism to do it. Whereas again, going back to enablement, ordinarily, what does enablement do? Share your success stories, enablement. So I think AI has been brought in as these chief AI officer roles and all the other great titles, fancy titles that they deserve, but they're not thinking about the glue. Like, well, how do we really infiltrate this throughout the business, giving it to the right functions at the right time? So that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm seeing.
Well, and one word that's I know you like to talk about a lot, and I think has to go back to what you're saying is empathy. I think enablement has empathy for the day in the life of the seller. A lot of the other roles in go-to-market don't. They've never been in that shoe, and they've never felt like the day-to-day, like really where are they getting stuck? Where are they spending time? I think sellers also always get a bad name for, having all the time in the world and how could they be busy? They shouldn't be busy. And I think until you actually walk in their shoes, you don't understand like what is their day-to-day? Where can we actually take stuff off of their plate so they can focus on the human skills? But I do want to jump now to empathy, because I know this is your word that you talk about a lot. And it's actually how I found you on LinkedIn, is you did a post on empathy, but you also have some unique thoughts on empathy. So I'd love to hear more on kind of where empathy comes in to selling and maybe where it's too much.
Yeah, I think it's across, so whether it's in leadership, or I think whether it's in like an individual contributor role, I think where it can become too much is specifically with sales leaders, is when you then, I would say, people can start to take advantage because you are almost too understanding. And it's like everything, isn't it? It's a balance. And I always find it such a shame when you have a real empathetic leader. The sad part is there will always be somebody who will take advantage of that. So that's when I think it can actually hurt you. But I think it's like everything, isn't it? Too much of anything is going to hurt you. Too little of something is going to hurt you. So just trying to find that balance. And for sure, I would say early on in my leadership journey, I was too empathetic. I think when you're naturally an empath, which I certainly am, you really have to focus on not being too understanding, which, those two words you think wouldn't really come in a bit of a paradox, don't really come in a sentence together. But I think it's like everything. It's just finding that balance. And equally the same when you're selling. If you're too understanding, you lose control of the deal because you're like, well, they've got that big project that they need to deal with. It's a lot for them to deal with. And I think you can just lose a lot of control by I think being too understanding.
A question for you on this. So sorry to put you in the hot seat on it. But I've been seeing with a lot of my clients recently, coaching clients, is generationally, but maybe it's experience. You have me rethinking my thoughts here. I always thought that maybe this is a generational thing, that we have a new generation of leaders that are servant leaders, but almost to a fault. And it's because they have so much empathy. But what you just said was you also were too empathetic. And I'm looking back at my career, and I probably was too when I was an early leader. So is it just an experience thing, or do you think there's also some generational impacts on how sales leaderships are showing up, and how much empathy they have?
Yeah, that is a really hot take, and I do like it for a number of reasons. And I do think the generational part plays a huge role because it is very different. And what I mean by is that the world of work that we live in now is very different to when I was like early on in my sales career. I think there's a lot more that people get away with now in comparison to, I'm not saying it was like the military, but it wasn't far off when you're in sales like many years ago. Whereas I think just, culturally for organizations, I think it's very difficult because I'm not saying that people feel like they have more rights because people should have rights, but I think it's almost that kind of, I don't want to upset the apple cart, or I don't want them to, people like you see this transient workforce where people can leave whenever they like. I think that's probably changing now because the job market is definitely tightening up. But I think where you can almost be held to ransom, if you're a high performer, I don't want to upset them, or I'll let them get away with this, or it's probably because they're. So I think that can definitely fall into the equation of the generation can be quite demanding, whereas I think generation back along was more, okay, I've just got to get this done. However that looks, I've just kind of got to get it done. That's my leader. If they bark orders, I just have to go. So I think there's definitely an element of that, and that's a huge generalization. But yes, I also do think it probably does come down to experience and knowing where you can push and pull. Because when you're trying to earn your stripes, you can be in people pleaser mode. So again, it's that check and balance of, am I being people pleaser to earn my stripes when I've just got to have more conviction and confidence in my ability? Versus, I guess, when you're more experienced, I know when to push and pull. I know when to push and pull right now, and you kind of got that experience to leverage to know, okay, kind of enough is enough, because you've seen enough things happen, and you can see those triggers or those alerts, I guess, maybe sooner than what a inexperienced leader would have.
We're saying experience. I think generation is a hot take, Kel. But I do think you're right. I've seen it too in the leaders I've coached that have been on my teams and like what I've seen around me. So I do think there's something to that hot take. But the experience isn't just like the years that you spend working. I think it's like being developed. It's going back to the coaching point. I had a fantastic coach at one point in my career. I've had a few. I was very empathetic as a young leader as well. And one of the things that he taught me is that that's just a tool in my tool belt of leadership. And I've honed it really well, but I can't reach for it every time. I need to develop other tools for other situations. And that framing was really helpful for me to say, like, I don't have to abandon this. Like, this is naturally like what I lean towards, but I need to focus on that awkward like moments you talked about before on like the other tools that I need, the more like direct or micromanaging style tools that are necessary in performance plans. And so I do think it's experience, but it's also like, if you have the will to grow as a leader, you have to go build those leadership skills. And if empathy is natural for you, great. There are other ones that have to come along with it. It's not the only skill you need in helping people, for sure.
Yeah. And I think even creating the awareness of, a lot of leaders don't know what those skills are. So if you take a step back and look at some of these behavioral psychometrics. So when you go through, whether it's talent insights, whether it's DISC, and there's a whole heap of them out there, when you understand what your natural tendencies are, so naturally you may be more empathetic. So what might it look like to be on the opposite end of the spectrum, to be more of a challenger? And I think that's, unless you've gone through this coaching and you've gone through the kind of psychometrics, you have no idea how to position who you are. And unless you've had that development, like you say, you're living in blind spot land, because you don't know what the other options are available to you. So I think it's really important to have that, like whether it's understanding yourself. So whatever kind of behavioral assessments you can do to understand more about yourself as a starting point. And then again, that kind of coaching ability to understand, well, if I want to be more, and it's not being disingenuous, if I want to be more in this side, because that's not typically what does that look like? And it is always the opposite end of the spectrum. Like if you're more data focused, you're probably less likely to be more of a people person. So how do you be more of a people person? If you're more kind of empathetic and more of a harmonious person, how do you be more direct and challenging? And I think you can't often get there by yourself. Sometimes you do need that kind of external help and support to give you a bit of a pull and how to get
think
there.
Going back to your AI example, there's another great use case here where if you frame your AI chat conversation appropriately to like not tell you that you're great at everything you do, but to, say, I'm struggling with XYZ. I can't, like, my deals slip at the X hour or like the last hour, or like I can't get my team motivated beyond this level. What am I missing in these approaches? Like, what am I not doing right? And that can help point you towards like what you need to go ask for from leadership or use your learning and development dollars for to go fill those gaps. Because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know until someone like holds the mirror up, and you're not sure who to ask for help if you're just kind of floundering, especially in this constricting job market. It can be scary to raise your hand and say, like, I need help being a better leader right now because I feel something is off. And so I do think it's another great use case if you frame your prompt correctly for AI to just kind of get that first step going in that direction of building that skill.
And simply that just brought me on to reminded me of a program that we rolled out with a go-to-market team. And it was very, very similar to that concept, but it was more so for individual contributors working with their clients. So again, they would say, I think, again, from what they knew already, they might say, okay, I've got this second meeting or first meeting, whatever it might be. I think my client is a D. Help me position this in a way that's going to be able to talk to a D. So again, it's that kind of just-in-time coaching where you set the agent up to understand more about preferences and how they can even, not even down to the verbal communication, even down to written. So how can I write this email in a way that someone analytical would respond well, or somebody more direct would respond well? Because in a very busy world, which sellers do live in, to try and departmentalize all of these different things that you need to think about to ensure that you're engaging and communicating with a client is a lot. So if you've got some sort of capacity as in building an agent to help construct these ways of communication based on people's profiles, you just cut through the noise. So that's reminding me of a really good example.
I feel like I should send an agent to anyone who's trying to sell to me and be like, just put the bullets. I just want the bullets. Please be concise.
Your LinkedIn inbox is going to go wild now, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Well, we are hitting the point in our episode. We could probably talk forever. I love talking to other sales leadership coaches, but we're hitting the point in the episode where we want you to ask our audience a question. So we have a listener. What question should they think about on their commute to work or while they're cooking dinner tonight?
So I would say a question, one of my biggest things is always curiosity. So I love seeing curiosity in my team. Like over the years, I'll always test for curiosity. So I would say, be with a curious mindset. I would say, think about that one thing that you're doing, that whatever that process is, whatever that thing in your role, just think on that commute home, how could I do this more effectively with AI? And I know this sounds like such a, again, go back to a cliche saying, but I'm kind of asking this question out to the ether, just because I think people are too busy to think about it when they're in work. I think there is so much that you need to do the moment you switch on that laptop, from back to back to back to back meetings to, I need to be able to do this proposal, or all these activities, that if you just give yourself time and think, what is that one thing that I could do this week that might just give me some time back, that might make me more efficient? And it might be something they need to go and learn. It might be something that they can actually implement. But I think just give yourself that space and that time to think, what can I do without waiting for someone else to give it to me? Because again, I think we're in a world of, if it's not put on my plate, I won't do it. If it's not served up to me, I won't do it. But I think it's a really great time to be a change maker. Like if you want to show value to your organization, don't wait for it to be handed to you. Go with the idea. Just be curious. How can you innovate? How can you not fight to stay? Because I'm not saying that everyone's jobs are going to be at risk, but if you want to be a change maker, just think, how can I do something differently? What idea can I bring to my leader, to anyone else, that is showing innovation? And I think we just need to see more of that, because how many sellers have you worked with that? I'm not saying people love to complain, but there's a lot to complain about, especially in the world of SaaS. Like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. So rather be the complainer, be the change maker. How can you do something differently? So yeah, give yourself that time to reflect on how you can create change.
That is Tiffany's superpower right now. Since she left corporate and hasn't started consulting, she's taking the summer off. I feel like I wake up every morning to a text message of, I just automated this. I'm like, I'm so glad you have all the time to think about this.
I mean, yeah. The great thing about like what you're recommending there, Dannii, though, is that it puts the person in the driver's seat of what you're automating instead of waiting for someone to say like, we are going to like automate this portion of your job. And that's the portion that brings you joy, perhaps. Like maybe that's what you love doing. When you make the recommendation and think and spend the time thinking about it, you can automate the thing that doesn't bring you any energy or any joy in your day to day. Like it gives you more control over what you're saying no to on your plate to make time for more of the yes. And I think there's an inherent benefit in that as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, Dannii, where can everyone find you? Whoever's listening, what should they go to find you, connect with you, get more information?
Yeah, I would say I'm always hanging out on LinkedIn. So yeah, regularly commenting and posting on LinkedIn. So yeah, most definitely the best place to get me, Dannii Mathers.
Well, thank you so much for the conversation today. Like Kelly said, we probably will have a second episode with you on it at some point because the brief notes that we have drafted had far more topics than we managed to get through today. So I really appreciate the time. Coaching is such a hot topic, especially as it weaves its way into the AI world. So I hope everyone found this as exciting of a conversation as Kelly and I did, because it's one of our favorite topics.
I don't want it to end.
Either.
Thank you. No, it's been absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed talking to both of you. So yeah, thank you.
Perfect. If you're not following us today, please make sure you subscribe and click follow. Thanks.